So, guys, the United States has just dropped a massive diplomatic bombshell. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced strict visa restriction on Nigerians accused of undermining religious freedom. But is this about protecting Christians, or is it Uncle Sam playing Big Brother again? In this video, we are going to watch the Arise News Morning Show. Dr. Abati, Ayo'S, and Vimbai tear this situation apart. They ask the hard questions. Who is on this list? And why did the Nigerian government wait until it was too late? Let's get into it. Let's get into the clip. So sit back and take a watch.
Morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Vimbai.
Good morning, Adefemi.
How's everybody?
Intellectual today with
Thank you. It's the glasses, isn't it? It's doing a little something.
Yes, it's doing something.
Good morning to you, viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Marco Rubio, that is the US Secretary of State. He has announced visa restrictions on Nigerians accused of undermining religious freedom. Now, according to his post on X, the tighter controls will affect people who knowingly direct, authorize, fund, or support, or carry out violations of religious freedom. Now, the move comes just a month after the US declared Nigeria a country of particular concern, and just a day after US lawmakers held a roundtable discussion with religious freedom and foreign relations experts in Washington, D.C. on escalating religious violence here in Nigeria. Now, if you remember, last month, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, Chris Smith, introduced a resolution recommending visa bans and asset freezes on individuals and entities responsible for severe violations of religious freedom in Nigeria. So that's what we're seeing. Well, staying in the United States with US-Africa relations, and the presidents of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, that's Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame, are set to sign a US-brokered peace and economic agreement with Washington today. Now, both leaders arrived in Washington earlier this week, as well as Kenyan President William Ruto, who will reportedly be present at the signing, aimed at ending this months of long-running conflict in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, the White House has confirmed that President Donald Trump will host the two leaders for this ceremony, dubbed the Washington Peace Summit, where they will formally ratify the deal first outlined in that June 2025 agreement, which was signed by their foreign ministers and later refined through negotiations in Qatar and then in Washington. Now, the accord does follow months of intense fighting, including a recent M23 rebel offensive that seized key cities in North Kivu, killing thousands and also displacing hundreds of thousands of civilians. Lastly, on today's World Brief, renewed UK-German economic ties are on the table as Germany's president is in London for the first full German state visit in 27 years. Under the spotlight are renewed UK-Germany economic ties. Now, the two countries, under the New Kensington Treaty, are pushing for deeper trade, green energy, and defense industry cooperation at a lavish Windsor Castle banquet with festive decor, a 20-foot Christmas tree, and gourmet dishes from smoked trout as a starter to a partridge in puff pastry. The guest list range from political heavyweights to celebrities. You've got Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He sat beside supermodel Claudia Schiffer, a symbol of the cultural as well as the diplomatic reconnections on the table there. Those are your World Brief stories and your newspaper headlines from across Nigeria and indeed the world. Love to hear your thoughts.
All right, well, let's begin on Marco Rubio, who, I mean, in the past 48 hours between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, I'm not sure who's given us more spicy rhetoric, because Marco Rubio had quite a moment yesterday. I watched his interview on Fox News, where he spoke about the Trump administration position that radical Islam is taking over the world, is a threat to the world, that it's not about cornering a community in Iraq or Syria, but that they feel that, ultimately the biggest threat is to their own country, the United States. And I begin with this just to chime into sort of this renewed vigor, if I may call it that, around trying to check what they perceive is, the progress or the aggressive progression of radical Islam. And this is why, according to this administration, Nigeria is in the spotlight because of the persecution of Christians. Well, they are now saying that they will do a visa ban. ban, which for me I think is a better approach than a blanket sanction that will now cause untold suffering to innocent Nigerians. So we're still waiting for the list. Ted Cruz says he has a list as well. The Nigerian government has a list. There's several institutions that have said that they have lists of terrorism financiers and so forth. So I believe that, of course, in order for them to institute this visa ban, there's going to have to be a piece of legislation that will include the lists of the people who are involved in this. Well, that's what they've done in other countries. I remember when they did the similar sanctions for Zimbabwe, the legislation did have names on a list. So that will be interesting. However, Congressman Chris Smith is saying that he doesn't feel that the Nigerian government is doing enough. He is saying that he feels the perpetrators of all of the criminality are still running around with absolute impunity. So in the last session in the House Appropriations, he called for three things. The first thing he called for was the disarmament of armed groups. He says if he sees that the Nigerian government is actively disarming these groups, then there's room for the United States to ease on their aggressive approach. The second thing he called for the restoration of displaced communities. He's saying for as long as we are not seeing people going back to their homes, then again, we feel the Nigerian government is not enough. And then lastly, the prosecution of criminals. Now, all of these things, we ask ourselves, is it within the United States, jurisdiction to be demanding these things? But unfortunately, we've put ourselves in this vulnerable position. But dare I say, these are the same things that Nigerians are asking for as well.
Yes, truly. Yesterday, I made the case around following the Congress's second hearing that the disappointing fact, while it was praiseworthy in the interest, but the disappointing fact is that Nigeria ought to take the lead, and I continue to maintain that. Because if we don't do that, then the US will continue to act as big brother and make decisions like this. Let me go to the US visa ban. This is not the first time the US is employing its powers, the executive is employing its powers under the Immigration and Nationality Act, specifically Section 212, addressing areas where the US government can deny or revoke visas of persons across different spectrums, including violators of religious freedom, is contained under the Act. And as part of that is why they've announced that one of the measures, based on the investigations that they have done, because they've actually had, and they continue to have hearings, is that they would take this measure. Recall that in addition to boots on the ground, guns are blazing, that President Trump had threatened Nigeria. He had also said there would be sanctions. And we have not actually really looked at the ramifications of economic sanctions on the country, especially in the area of the fact that Nigeria receives billions of dollars in aid from the United States of America annually. Already, the suspension of aid to support HIV and AIDS in Nigeria, we've seen. Pardon? PEPFAR. We've seen the impact on how people who are living with the condition have limitations in accessing drugs. We talked about it during World AIDS Day on the 1st, and so it's important for us to highlight the fact. Finally, I say this to say that whilst the US is doing its bits, at least to the extent that they feel is necessary to address persecutions of Christians, Christian genocide, the Nigerian side hasn't done anything, even if they say there's no Christian genocide. How about the terrorism belaboring the Middle Belt? What has been done? Where are the sanctions? We only hear of words around, we know who they are, we know where they are. But what has been done? What efforts, what moves have been done? And I still maintain that around the Christian genocide conversation is still debatable, because until they are able to investigate properly the people who are worst affected, they cannot legitimately claim that it's not happening.
Agreed.
Okay, very quickly. The Washington Forum today to be attended by President Felix Tshisekedi of DRC and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Now, both countries have been at each other's loggerheads, with DRC claiming that President Rwanda is the one supporting the rebels in Eastern Eastern DRC, causing a lot of problems in Kivu, in Bukavu, resulting in violence and the displacement of thousands of persons. Now, so Washington Forum, both of them are there. The program for today, at 10 a.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Rwandan time, the two presidents will be received by President Trump, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and other senior officials to set the tone of the meeting. At 10:30 a.m. to 11:30, they will have a meeting at the East Room. And then at the end of that, both leaders from Congo, DRC, and Rwanda will sign the peace agreement. Now, part of the content of this agreement, we're told, will include, ceasefire, disarmament, possibly access to humanitarian issues. But don't forget, one element in that discussion will be President Trump saying, well, he's trying to make peace and, America is interested in mineral resources in the eastern DRC, which is very rich. Now that they can't have access to rare earth materials in China, they are looking at Congo. But of course, President Trump will claim credit for that. After that, statements will be made by the two leaders. Then at 11:30 EST to 1 p.m., they will have what is called a working lunch. And then later after that at 1 p.m., which is 8 p.m. Rwandan time, there will be a press conference, and David will be there. So the question to ask is, in June, America intervened between the same two countries. In November, Qatar intervened between the M23 rebels and also DRC. Nothing came out of that. What will be the way forward? What is likely to happen this time around? That is a big question. Will this lead to peace? However, President Ruto is there as, some kind of guarantor. He being the chairman of the East African community. The other person that I think should be in the room should be that Angolan reporter, Herrera's Venus, when the meeting in June held, and President Trump was excited by her pulchritude, telling her, you are beautiful inside. I hope they will remember to invite that Angolan journalist to put President Trump in a very good mood. Finally, diplomacy yesterday in St. George's Hall, King Charles III hosting the German president. Well, some politics there beyond, just having a festive event. As follows. The king used the occasion to talk about Ukraine and to reaffirm England's support for the EU, ensuring that Russia ends its invasion of Ukraine. That was a political statement. Yes. Maybe it was drafted by the government for the king. But it was also a very friendly atmosphere with the German president reminding the king that that 20-foot Christmas tree that you referred to was started by a German, yes, Queen Charlotte, in 1800, who was married to King George III. And then some jokes about football. But it was a very convivial occasion with the Duchess of Kent, Kate Middleton, yes, wearing a very special tiara, and Claudia Schiffer also there.
Doesn't she?
Once a supermodel, always.
Some beauty in the room.
Yes.
Well, let's end it there. Thank you very much, Adefemi Akinson.
Okay, let us unpack what we've just watched because there's a lot to digest here. First off, did you catch Vimbai's analysis? She hit the nail on the head regarding the rhetoric coming out of the US right now. We are seeing a very aggressive stance from the Trump administration, specifically Marco Rubio. Vimbai pointed out something crucial. This isn't a blanket ban on all Nigerians, but a targeted sanction. She mentioned that lists are flying around everywhere. Ted Cruz has a list. The Nigerian government has a list. The scary part. We don't know who exactly is on this new US list yet. Is it politicians? Is it religious leaders? Vimbai correctly noted that targeted bans are better than sanctioning the whole country, but it raises the question of jurisdiction. Then we have to talk about Ayo'S take. Man, Ayo didn't mince words. She brought up a most painful truth of this entire saga: failure of leadership. Her argument is that if the Nigerian government had taken the lead in investigating religious violence and prosecuting the killers in the Middle Belt and the North, the US wouldn't have an excuse to step in. She called it out because we refuse to clean our own house. Big brother America is stepping in to do it for us. And Ayo raised a terrifying point about slippery slope of sanctions. It starts with visas, but it could end with aid. She mentioned PEPFAR, the HIV/AIDS relief program. if the US decides to tighten the screw economically because they feel Nigeria isn't listening, it's the common man on the street who relies on those health programs that will suffer, not the elite. Finally, Dr. Abati, as always, he looked at the bigger geographical picture while he touched on the DRC and the Rwanda peace deal, suggesting Trump is only interested because of the mineral resources needed to fight China. His point connects back to Nigeria. The US moves based on interest. The chemistry between these three really highlighted the confusion and the danger Nigeria faces. We are caught between internal security and external pressure. It's a mess. Now, let me give you my critical take on this because I think there are layers the news might miss. Look, nobody denies that there is violence in Nigeria. Christians are being buyed, Muslims are being the same thing, but the US designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, specifically regarding religious freedom, is a very specific political tool. Marco Rubio is playing to a domestic audience in America by framing the violence in Nigeria solely as religious persecution. It simplifies a complex conflict involving land, resources, and banditry into a narrative that suits Washington. My fear is that this visa ban might be used to strong-arm Nigerian politicians into aligning with US interests rather than actually solving the violence in the Plateau or Benin. Ayo was right. We complain about sovereignty, but sovereignty comes with responsibility. You cannot claim to be a sovereign nation when you cannot protect your own citizens from being slaughtered in their homes. When Nigerian government fails to prosecute terrorists and instead we see stories of rehabilitation for bandits, we lose the moral grounds to tell the US to back off. This visa ban is a direct indictment of our judicial system. It is shameful that we need foreign country to tell us that killing people for their faith is wrong. We need to be very careful. The elite in Nigeria love their summer holidays in Atlanta and their medical trip to Houston. This visa ban hits them where it hurts their lifestyle. But if this escalates into economic sanctions, as Ayo hinted, the Naira will suffer even more. We are playing a dangerous game of chicken with a superpower that currently has a very American-first aggressive foreign policy. Ultimately, this should be a wake-up call, not because we want to please America, but because we should value Nigerian lives. If this shame from the US makes our government finally wakes up and prosecute those funding terrorism and religious violence, then good. But if it's just another political game, then the average Nigerian is once again the pawn on the chessboard. But that's just what I think. I want to hear from you. Do you support the US visa ban on these individuals? Do you think it will actually stop the violence, or is it just noise? And who do you think is on that list? Drop your comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Ayo'S Trending Gist for more breakdowns like this. See you in the next one.